showtime!
Yo, what is going on, Patriots Nation? After a while, it's your science guy, Soor and your full-time scientist, fuller-time sports fan, back with my guy and newly anointed father, Aiden Hauser. What's going on, Aiden? Tell us about the new chapter in your life.
Just catching up on sleep. We had a little girl, so I'm doing my best just to raise her well as a Patriots fan in Packers country. Showed her when she was like 5 days old, maybe like her first bit of Drake May highlights. So hopefully that's a trend we can continue.
Very good, very good. We'll have to find a montage of Bryce Behringer highlights to show.
Yeah.
A lot of things to choose from.
Oh yeah, tons. It'll probably be hours, but it's like hours of film we'll have to root through.
Oh man, but yeah, it's glad you're able to take some time out of your busy schedule to talk Patriots, and we've got the combine coming up. So what are your initial thoughts? Who are you watching for?
I think the guys that I like to watch for are usually like kind of the lesser known guys that are like there's more concerns about. Like obviously everybody knows certain players are going to show out, like, oh, Ashton Genty, like he's going to probably run a good time. Like all the stars like that are kind of solidified. I kind of don't really care to watch for. It's usually the guys who are trying to like boost their draft stock. So there are a couple. I don't know. A guy that I really think of is like Xavier Restrepo from Miami. I love him. He's just. It's interesting because like we have Douglas as like our slot receiver, but Restrepo is like produced well. He's a good athlete, and he's showed up in big games. And then I also like another receiver type is Harold Fannin from Bowling Green. He's a big athlete. He absolutely killed it this last year. I think he had like 1,500 receiving yards. Like just torched everybody. And I think he'll probably be he'll for sure be a day 2 pick. So just kind of like guys like that, especially because Henry's reliable, but he's not going to be around forever. And Hooper's, while he had a good year, like he's old, and I don't know if he's going to be worth like another extension, or at least I guess like a pricey extension just with his age and stuff like that. And then I kind of just watched like some tackles and guards who are, I think of like Emory Jones from LSU, who's like he was a highly coveted. Like everyone thought he was going to be the next big thing, and then like you don't hear about him much anymore. So it's just kind of interesting how some of these guys drop.
Yeah, I mean we benefited a lot from a player from LSU who started out really hot and then didn't finish great in his college career. Kayshon Boutte was kind of that guy. He was looking like a first round pick, and now he's playing like a guy that maybe should have gotten a first round pick. Maybe that's stretching a little bit, but like he's playing.
I thought you were about to go on the Danny Etling route for LSU great.
Yes, of course. He's done. He did so much for the guys. So very much. No, but I think the wide receiver crop is especially interesting because you don't have that surefire guy. You don't have. I mean, McMillan, but it's still not like what Marvin Harrison Jr. was last year of like a sure generational guy that was just so ridiculously presumptive, and there's not even a conversation around anybody else. Like there's a lot of depth here. You know, I like Ted McMillan a lot, but I also like Luther Burden, and but then in day 2 or 3 getting receivers, perhaps a better track record than they do in day one, I would argue. And so definitely interested in seeing what kinds of players are available late. And I'm glad that you identified Restrepo. It's I'm definitely looking at him. I'm also looking at another underrated guy, Tez Johnson, from Oregon. The only reason I'm a little lower on him than some of the other people around his profile is that he's on the shorter side, and same with Restrepo. Like, we kind of have the short king wide receiver covered with Demario Douglas, but when you're talking day 2, day 3, you definitely want to take that kind of guy. I think if we're going to take a wide receiver in the first round, though, I definitely want to go for that for a taller guy, which is why the size of Tet McMillan is very appealing to me. It's my only hesitation there is 4 feels like a reach.
Well, yeah, that's the thing is like I think he's a really good receiver, but he's not in that Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison class. So I would agree that 4 is a reach. I would be more comfortable like maybe around 10 if we were to somehow trade back.
Yeah, and it is seeming like trading back could be a prudent course of action for us.
It's just tough that like this is such just like a bad year to be a bad team, like class wise.
Absolutely.
Like
and you don't have those like surefire like, oh, this is the obvious pick at 1, this is the obvious pick at 2, this is the obvious pick at 3 and 4.
Right.
And more importantly, I feel like the rankings on the draft board and just the general consensus of who the best players are in the class don't line up the way I would like with the positions that we need. And so it kind of puts this critical question out there. Do we prioritize our needs? Do we get the best available? Do we find a way to do both by trading back?
Right.
I'm kind of in favor of that third option because I think our needs are just so pressing. Like, Abdul Carter is so great, but we have at least a functional defensive line. And it's just our deficiencies at receiver, our deficiencies at offensive line, our deficiencies at corner are just so glaring that I feel like those need to be addressed.
Well, it's also interesting. It's like, I think what we do in free agency, or at least the first batch, is going to dictate like a lot of questions are going to be answered about what we're going to do in the draft. Like, because I think when does that start? Like, in the next few weeks, doesn't it? Like, the official season's like kind of open, and then you can start negotiating contracts and whatnot. I don't remember the time frame exactly.
And I think it would be a smart thing for us to do to try to see what we can get out of free agency before making moves in the draft. Ideally you can action issues, Aiden.
I'm not. Is it on your end or my end?
I think it's on my end.
Okay.
I think it's on my end. I'll splice the recording as necessary.
Okay.
Give me a second. All right. We are back. Yeah. I think I want the Patriots to be aggressive early. I think the Patriots kind of took a wait and see approach last year with free agency. It did not serve us well. I feel like the best talent in the free agency class got taken pretty quickly, and we kind of got left getting the leftovers. That's how we ended up with Chuks Okorafor, for instance. Do you think we should start by addressing the O-line or start by addressing wide receiver, start by addressing corner? Where do you think is the best first place to go?
In free agency?
Yeah.
It's tough because there are like I don't know. I think we address receiver just because it really depends on T. Like I don't remember a receiver as good as him like potentially hitting the free agent market in like quite a long time. So a lot depends on him. So I think he should be our priority. And then if not, I think I don't know. Like it really depends on what you view as. I think how you view the draft is going to impact a lot of what you do in free agency as well. Like, are you going to rather have Tet and maybe hit the O line in free agency, or would you rather try and get one of those guys and maybe hit the O line or something else in the draft sort of deal? Um, at this point, I think I don't know. I'd almost just see if we can get one of those top receivers and one of those top linemen and even go Travis Hunter if he falls to us because I'm more of the if we're gonna pick somebody at 4 and not trade back, like you gotta take the best player available, like a difference maker instead of attacking need because we have so many needs. Like just getting a blue chip prospect is what you have to do at 4. Like you gotta hit a home run there.
Yeah. Yeah. Fully agreed. And I think I completely agree with addressing receiver first in free agency because partially because we have such a bad track record of drafting
Right.
receivers, and we're unsure about a lot of this class. I would rather get a surefire talent in free agency, and then maybe get a receiver late round one or like day two where you're not trying to get your wide receiver one in the draft because that has just not worked out well for us.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we have a much better track record with getting offensive linemen and corners in the draft, and so focus on your strengths, focus on the positions you're capable of evaluating well. Um, and T Higgins is very much in play. I was, we were led to believe he wasn't. There were reports that the Bengals were very optimistic on signing a long-term contract with him. He himself refuted those reports, and so it does seem like we have a fairly good shot as long as the Bengals don't tag him.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, even then, like if they tag him, I'm sure they'd still be open to trading him, but that would still be a bummer. But I think a lot of that depends on if he even has intentions of wanting to sign a long-term contract with us, because I'm sure he would rather go to a contender than a rebuilding franchise. But
Right. And that's where hopefully he's available in free agency and we can throw money at him and take that approach because you have to at this point where we are as a franchise, you have to pay a little bit more. You kind of have to pay a suck premium.
mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, you look at the Patriots as a free agent destination. We may not have location going for us, although I think Boston's a nice place. But obviously, we've got the winters, you've got the income tax, all those things. But you look at the franchise, and now all of a sudden you're not dealing with I have to play with Mac Jones and I have to play with a first time head coach and I don't know about this team. All of a sudden you're playing with a pretty promising revamped staff. You're playing with Vrabel, you're playing with May, you're playing with Josh McDaniels, and so guys that have now proven track records. May is probably one of those quarterbacks that a lot of players want to hitch their wagon to after how he played in the first year. And so, given that, this is not a bad time for the Patriots to make a pitch for someone great while they're not. I wouldn't say their stock is up, but they've done everything they can to make themselves as attractive of a destination as a bad team can make themselves.
Right. Yeah, and it's not like we're one of those teams where it's like, like we're the Giants where we have Malik Neighbors and nobody, or the Raiders, or like we we made good moves, and like the good moves is like we have a franchise quarterback, at least it looks like, and like a head coach that a lot of players talk really highly about, and I know that Titans fans are bummed left.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, if you want a player that has, or if you want to be a number one receiver, you will easily get that post if you're T. Higgins there. And then at that point, our group of mediocre receivers turns into a group of pretty solid number 2 and number 3 receivers.
Mm-hmm.
Like the problem with our receiver core has always been that we don't have a guy that can truly be a number 1 receiver. But all of a sudden, if you're T. Higgins, you come on, and then you have Kendrick Bourne and Demario Douglas and Keyshawn Boutte, the way they played last season, as your number 2, 3, 4 options, and maybe Jalen Polk will figure it out. You've got a couple second years. You've got a solid tight end in Hunter Henry, and you've got potentially another solid one in Austin Hooper if we re-sign him.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a good suite of targets to kind of take some of the attention off you now that you're a number 1 receiver, and then you've got a quarterback that can and will get you the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, it's a pretty good deal, and you'll get a lot of the credit if the Patriots get a lot better, which I just do not see 4 wins coming again. There's just too much positive change happening to regress, and I think there is going to be a lot of improvement. Whether or not we'll contend next year is kind of depends a lot on how this offseason goes, but this team is on the right path. They've put themselves on the right path in this free agency.
Right, and I'm actually like Vrabel just from his personality and like how he's been in New England just seems like he's just an intense and aggressive guy. I don't see him being passive with $130 million of cap space lying around.
No, and we've seen some evidence, especially with the Taki move, that Vrabel seems to have a little bit of say over Elliott Wolf right now, and that's important. I think it's you want a GM, you want a coach, you don't want either of them to have all the power.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like how things went with Elliott Wolf taking the helm alone. Nor did I like how it looked with Gerard Mayo saying blanket statements like we're going to be big spenders and then not being big spenders.
Mm-hmm.
I think Vrabel will be a lot more deliberate and methodical with the way he does things. I think he's going to be able to get a good read on where the needs are and what the right players are to fill those needs. I think he did a great job in general with quarterback aside. He did a great job with getting good personnel on that Titans team, and he doesn't have to worry about quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Those Titans teams had great wideouts, pretty threatening defenses at times, or at least good playmakers. He obviously has a keen eye for defense. He was able to get good playmakers on the team. I think I think it bodes well that we've got Vrabel making some decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting, going back to the combine a little bit. It's interesting that you mentioned Ashton GT, because he's one of the players not showing up at the combine, and there are a lot of major guys that are taking the same stance. There's Shedeur Sanders, Abdul Carter, even a bunch of others. And so, how do you feel about that? If you're a GM, does that reflect negatively on you as as you're evaluating players? Does the choice for a healthy player to not go to the combine serve as a red flag for you?
I think a healthy player not going to the combine does. I can see the side. I can see some players like reasoning of like, you look at like Abdul Carter. I think he is actually nursing an injury, but it's like, if your stock's already high, why like go to the combine if all you can do is just lower it? So like I get that, But at the same time, like I want guys who are like, you know what, like I have confidence in myself. Like I know the type of player I am, and like even though my draft stock is high, I'm gonna go out there and crush it and prove to people like you should have no concerns about me and take me. So like I kind of like that like competitive aspect. Like for example, I was like I hated Cam Ward sitting out that second half of that bowl game he was in. Just like his little business decision there, it was just like that's not really you don't really show that like I don't know that dog mentality that everyone looks for of like I'm still gonna play like just because of my passion of the game. Um, so I can see both sides, but I'd much rather like I don't know. I think I'm more along the lines of like I want a guy to like want to show like what he's got.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I think obviously you don't want to risk worsening an injury. That
Mhm.
part I get, but to the point of like, oh, my draft stock is high, so I don't want to lower it. I would, you know, if I'm a Vrabel and I do think this is the way he thinks. He's got a little bit of Belichickian um, thinking in him in terms of what he expects out of his players and what the kind of dog mentality he expects. If you have a really good stock, then the right approach is, if you're healthy, is let me prove to the world why Mel Kiper has me in the top four.
Right.
Let me prove that I am a physical beast. Let me prove that I interview well. Let me prove that I'm a commensurate professional. I mean, if you have amazing on the field play and maybe not great measurables, I don't think that's going to hurt you as much as you think. But like, I think the mere fact of showing up and doing the thing at the combine, that for me is an important part of my evaluation, because it's kind of a practice, right?
Hmm.
Um, it's a good indicator if you show up and give your all at the combine that you're going to do the same at your team's practices, at your training camps, at your walkthroughs. And Vrabel places great importance on all of these things,
Hmm.
the same way Belichick did. And so, um, I really feel that if you're if you're looking at this draft class, especially with a lack of like surefire generational talent, these little things do matter.
Hmm. And I mean, yeah, and it especially like if you are like a top prospect and there are questions about you, it's a great way to like silence that. So like Tep McMillan, for example, I know a lot of people are like they think he's has okay speed, but it's like this is his chance to like run a fast 40 time and like show people like, oh, okay, like he does have that NFL type speed. Like,
Yeah, and even if his 40 time isn't great, he can prove that he has great agility and great game speed by having a good three cone. There are a lot of different ways for a player to prove themselves in the draft, and we
mhm.
know from our experience with a certain Mr. Brady that you can be a great player with a terrible 40 time.
Right. And be horrible. There's horrible players with great 40 times out there too. So it's just like it answers questions like from an athletic standpoint, but it's also good that it's not the end all be all.
Yeah. Also, recent reports. This actually happened today. The Patriots given Devon Goshaw permission to look for a trade.
I
Um,
saw that.
yeah, initial thoughts on that.
I mean, it's kind of a bummer. I see it's we I don't think we have the depth to be able to I mean lose a player like him. He hasn't been the like a all-star, but he played a significant role last season. So it's kind of a bummer how he's already like kind of wanting to abandon ship at this point.
Yeah, I fully agree. I didn't think interior defensive line was a position that we were going to have to address.
Hmm.
But obviously, if Gottschall is looking for a trade, that could change, especially because probably the guy I have the most confidence in on the interior defensive line, Christian Barmore, he still has that blood clot thing. It's that, that issue. It's hard to say to what extent it's going to be able to go away. It's just one of those things that could be recurring, and it's you never know. And then I feel like we have one good layer of depth at interior defensive line, but we don't have much more than that, and so all of a sudden that could become a position that you now have to address in free agency, or do a player for player trade if you're going to trade him. That's another strategy,
right? Because
I don't want a player that doesn't want to be here. So
right, who would be next up after him? I'm trying to think. Like, would it be Farms? Was Farms our third guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Farms did have some good moments, so I'm not complaining a ton about that. And you've also got Ekuale, who's playing at a very high level and was already on the fringe of being a starter, and so that would firmly place him into a starting role. But it's not ideal.
Right.
I liked the depth that we had, and it would definitely take a hit. You would need to make more. You would need to make more moves now. I think it kind of it adds that extra wrinkle to the free agency strategy, which it's tough because there's already just so much that we have to do.
Right. I just looked at the free agent class. It's not exactly the strongest you've seen.
Who's the best available?
Let me look again. I think it was Milton Campbell, they said, from the Eagles.
He's a good player.
But like Calais Campbell's in it. Jaron Reed's a free agent from Seattle. So like okay players, but it's not just like a studded defensive tackle class. Like Campbell's on his way out of the league too.
Yeah. I think the Patriots can find a Devin Ekuale-esque player. I'm not sure they're going to be able to get a huge improvement, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to get that kind of player for cheap either. So it's not an ideal situation. Sheldon Rankins is also available, and like Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill, who were tremendous players for the Bengals, are also available, but they're available at very, very high price points.
Right.
And while we have a lot of money, we don't have enough money to spend a ton of it on a defensive tackle.
Right. I think we have more pressing matters.
Which then boosts the case for going for an Abdul Carter, but I don't think he'll be available for.
I think he'll go 2 overall. I think he'll go to Cleveland at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the Myles Garrett stuff just solidified that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's enough for what we are going to do in the draft. Let's look at what we have done in the draft in the past. So we, as a recap, we're going to be doing a series on the best and worst of the Patriots draft, and we had easy pickings, some really easy choices for the worst first round pick, most of them from recent memory. I went with N'Keal Harry. Who'd you end up going with for first round?
For the worst? I can't remember. I think I said Michelle and Wynn because we passed on Lamar.
Oh God, yeah, that draft. Yes. And
then the best, I think I went with one of the linemen. I can't remember who.
Yeah, I think I went Seymour.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you did. Yeah, and I think I went. I can't remember. We had a lot of good first round picks. So
there were. Yeah. But Yeah, second round let's see, going in descending or going in order from recent to older. Jalen Polk, Keon White, Tyquan Thornton, Christian Barmore, Kyle Duggar, Josh Uche, Jawan Williams. Oh my God, that was a second round pick. Then Duke Dawson, Cyrus Jones, Jordan Richards, Jimmy Garoppolo. So yeah, and it keeps going from there. Let's start with worst.
Oh boy. Is Jalen Polk? Is that too early to say he's the worst? Because like
the same thing.
I'm looking at like Aaron Dobson, and he was bad, but like he had a Hall of Fame rookie year in comparison to Jalen Polk. Man, it's hard because like we have so many bad ones. I want to say, jeez. Probably, I think Jawan Williams might be the worst in recent memory. Just never solidified like a role, and we drafted him in what 2019. So yeah, he lasted 4 seasons with us, and then he's like, I don't even think he's in the league at this point. I'm looking at some of these other DBs with like Duke Dawson and like Cyrus Jones. I know they at least provided value on special teams, with Jones being a punt returner and stuff. I'm not sure Williams did either. He was just really bad. Yeah. I can't remember like a good moment where I was like, oh, like, okay, Jawan Williams might be a guy. Like from the day we picked him, I was like, who is this guy? I've never heard before in my life. Why'd we take him in the second round? And then he proved that he shouldn't have been. So there's a handful of really bad guys, but in recent memory, I'd say it's probably Jawan Williams for me.
Yeah, that's a solid pick. You saw me groan as I got to his name.
Yeah.
I would say there's lots to pick from.
It's like all the DBs are so bad.
This is probably recency bias, but I'm gonna say Tyquan Thornton. He got a lot of playing time to not do very much. Couldn't stay healthy, and when he was healthy, it was a lot of speed that didn't amount to much. Just so many drops in critical moments. It was a real swing and a miss.
And such a reach.
Yeah, it was the second big reach of that draft.
Yeah,
like we had already reached tremendously with Cole Strange, and then like yes, Thornton was the fastest player in that draft. I get the appeal, but you have to look beyond the speed and realize that he didn't have great numbers at Baylor, that his hands didn't match his speed. His 3-cone didn't match his speed. It seems to be all vertical, and in the NFL, just being fast isn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big miss,
right?
So that's what I'm going to go with. But we're spoiled for choice. But we're also spoiled for choice on the other end. There's some really good picks here. So
you want to go first? I went first last time. You can take the obvious one if you'd like.
So I'm gonna take the obvious one, and then I'm gonna choose another one because we all know that the obvious one is Rob Gronkowski.
Yeah.
He's the best tight end of all time. I will not hear Kelsey fans chime in with their rebuttal to that. He is the best tight end of all time.
Watch the highlights of both players and tell me which player was more dominant. Like
exactly. And remember while doing so that tight end is at its core an offensive line position, not just a receiver position. And Rob Gronkowski was also a very adept blocker. Kelsey is a big receiver. And when you put his receiving stats with other receivers, all of a sudden it's not all that impressive.
Right.
Obviously, he's a very impressive player. Don't get me wrong, But I would even put Gonzalez and Gates and a couple other guys over Kelsey as well, to be perfectly honest.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, best tight end
And Hunter Henry
of all time. No question that that's the first pick. But my non-Gronkowski pick, probably Sebastian Vollmer. Just very reliable, unsung hero on the offensive line. Extremely skilled. I mean, in Barmore and White, we've got a couple guys that could end up in a few years being on this list. There's some good picks, and I have a couple other names in mind, but I'm gonna let you go.
No, I'm glad you picked him because it made my choice a little easier. I'd say mine's probably gonna be Patrick Chung. Just longevity wise, it felt like it was a decade of just McCourty and Chung in that secondary, just like locking up the two safety positions. And I know Chung wasn't with New England the whole time. I think he had a short stint with Philly, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But then he came back for like another number of years, and I think he retired with us. But just longevity wise, like he was just a solid just safety for us. So yeah. I think he's just like the safe like pick.
Especially with the tumult that we currently have in the secondary, it's nice to think about an era where you had just kind of your two signature safeties and didn't have to worry about that position. And Chung was definitely the second guy behind McCourty, but that's fine. He was a very, very good second fiddle. You didn't really hear his name called in terms of players that were beaten for touchdowns.
No. It was those were good years of McCourty and Chung. And kind of just like underrated just because you didn't hear him a lot because it's not like he was like the heavy hitter, like sexy player that like, oh, you just like did this amazing play, but just like he was just very good for a long time.
Yeah. But a lot of good, a lot of bad in the second round. Jamie Collins is another name that came to mind. He had unsung impact. He had a couple stints with us. Shane Vereen was a fun player to watch. Brandon Spikes had a very brief period where he looked dominant, but not much else. A lot of inconsistency elsewhere in this round. Second round was not where we shined by any means. I'm just looking forward to when we get to the sixth round. There's
talk about the goat.
There's a lot of good in the sixth round.
Which is great, but it's like I wish we could say there's just a lot of good in the first and second round.
Yeah, where your good picks are supposed to be. The fact that there are more recognizable players in the sixth round than in the first round is wild to me.
Right.
But I guess Behringer will be the obvious one in the sixth round, and then we can pick from the others.
Yeah, right. Our goat, our king.
Everybody's goat.
Right.
But we'll be back maybe next week. We'll talk scheduling, but we'll be back soon with the third round of this. We'll be breaking down what we saw at the combine, and as we get closer to free agency, we'll be breaking down more specific strategies as we hear more. And until then, it's the science guy and the dad.
Pat, we'll come up with that. Yeah.
But now that you're a dad, we got to work it in. We got to work it in somewhere.
We'll work it in. I'll figure out a nickname or a sign-in or something.
How about this? Father of Patriots Nation.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yes. All right, that's the new nickname. We got Soor the Science Guy and Aiden, the Father of Patriots Nation.
Awesome. I love it.
We'll see you next week, Patriots Nation.